So today I begin my speech with an admission that I was wrong. No, I know. Hear me out. I said when this finance minister presented his budget in the spring, and he said that he was going to add $113 billion in new debt. I thought that not even this profligate group of overspenders could achieve something so monumental as that. And I went out and I said they're simply trying to inflate the numbers so that later on they could come back and say, it's not as bad as what we said, we beat our outrageously terrible expectations. Today, I admit I was wrong. Not only are they adding every bit as much debt as they said they would, they are adding even more. And Mr. Speaker, I am here today to talk about the enormous debt and the higher taxes with which they are burdening Canadians. But before I do, let me address the logic on which they base all of that debt and spending. That logic is that if we borrow enough and tax enough that we can use the money raised to stimulate economic activity that will pay it all back. And to paraphrase Winston Churchill, trying to borrow and tax our way to prosperity is like trying to lift ourselves into the air by standing in a bucket and pulling up on the handle. Because, Mr. Speaker, every bit of force upward on the handle is matched by increasing force downward on the bottom of the bucket. And so you don't get anywhere even though you expend all kinds of energy doing it. That energy, of course, is represented by the monetary value of all the taxes and debt this government is adding to the burden of Canadians. So let's review the facts. In the last election, the Liberals promised $26 billion worth of deficits over their mandate. $26 billion. Today's numbers show that the total debt accumulated over the mandate will be more like $143 billion. Their debt, they are not tripling their deficit projections, Mr. Speaker. They are actually quintupling the amount of deficit that they promised that they would burden Canadians with during the last election. They said the annual deficit would be $10 billion. We now know it will be $30 billion. They said in the budget that there would be a $6 billion contingency fund. Remember, the budget was only in spring. They added a $6 billion contingency in spring, and in fall, they've already blown it. And in fact, they've eliminated that contingency for the rest of their mandate. If I could quote from the former parliamentary budget officer, Kevin Page, who said just today, "We lost the contingency. Now it's gone. We spent it, and we have this $130 billion of additional debt." So a government creates a contingency and blows it within 6 months. Finally, they said their budget would be balanced within the mandate. That yes, there would be small, short-term deficits in the early days of a Liberal government, but by the time Canadians go back to the polls in 2019, we would have a balanced budget. Now, we have a document before us today presented by the Finance Minister, which doesn't even promise to balance the budget ever. There is literally not even a target date to return to balanced budgets, and the date on which the farthest date out for which we have any numbers is 2021, 2022, and in that year they're still projecting a $14.6 billion deficit. Now that's now without any additional spending that they will add in the next 5 budgets. Does anybody believe that in the next 5 budgets, the next 4 budgets, the next 3 budgets, that this Liberal government will add no new spending at all? Because if they did add no new spending, the best we could hope for is that in 2022, we would still have a $14 billion deficit. That is the track that they have put us on, Mr. Speaker. And for what? They told us that all of this spending was going to stimulate the economy. that all the money would go into our neighborhoods and communities, and people would spend more and build more and, of course, hire more, and there would be more growth and more hiring. So what has happened? Well, according to these documents, growth is actually down since this deficit spending binge began. In the last year, since this Prime Minister took office, we have not seen the creation of one net new full-time job. In fact, it's worse than that. 6,000 fewer people are working full-time than when the Prime Minister took office. There are 20,000 fewer manufacturing jobs, despite a low dollar. That ran against the expectations of everyone, the Bank of Canada, the Finance Minister himself. I even believed that despite this government's policies, a low dollar would mean a resurgence in manufacturing. 20,000 fewer people work in that sector today, and that it does not even touch upon the 40,000 fewer jobs in our energy sector. The blue-collar working family in this country is being clobbered right now. They have been devastated, despite the fact that we have a government that claims its deficit spending is specifically designed to create jobs for those very people. So we've added more debt. We've increased taxes. This Liberal government has increased taxes on the people who create jobs. And they're spending money they don't have on things that we don't need. And the result, Mr. Speaker, is that fewer people in Canada are working than when they took office. Now, they can just claim, they will claim that it's not their fault, that it's all external factors that led to these terrible outcomes. Well, you can't blame it on the previous government, because the numbers I'm citing are all numbers that come from the year in which this government has been in power. Nor can they say that was just the trajectory of things when they took office. According to the Parliamentary Budget Officer's report, the last 5 years of the previous Conservative government saw an average annual net increase in jobs of 200,000, and almost 100% of them were full-time. Now, we're seeing about 100,000 jobs being created in the last year, and 100% of those are part-time. As I said at the outset, there has not been a single net new full-time job created in the country since the Prime Minister took office. So he cannot blame it on a faulty trajectory where that's just, things were headed in a bad direction, and they just inherited that trajectory, and they're trying their best to turn it around. In fact, the trajectory was in the opposite direction. There had been over 1 million net new jobs created in the last 6 years of the previous Harper government, and under this government there has been no full-time job growth. Nor can he say that's just the way things are going around the world. In fact, the trend line of Canada's job growth is worse than in the United States, the G7, and the OECD, according to the recent Parliamentary Budget Officer report. And so we are as a nation, we are underperforming our peer group over the last year. Job creation was chugging along up until this Prime Minister took office, and then it slammed straight into a brick wall. But I don't want to be strictly negative, because I believe that there's nothing wrong with Canada that cannot be cured by what is right with Canada. Mr. Speaker, what is right with Canada? Our entrepreneurs are right with Canada. They're the ones who we know will generate the jobs that Canadians need. Scotiabank came out with a report just 2 weeks ago demonstrating that basically all of the job growth that Canada saw in the previous half-decade was from small and medium-sized enterprises. So how can we empower them to further create opportunities for our people? One, we can honor our commitments to them. The previous government announced reductions in the small business income tax rate. The Liberal Party across said that's a great idea. We're going to put it in our platform. When they took office, they canceled those tax cuts. There's still time to do the right thing, get back on track, and reenact those tax reductions so that our job creators have more money with which they can hire. Two, we can lower the cost of hiring. How can we do that? can cancel planned increases to payroll taxes. Payroll taxes, by their definition, are an increased cost on hiring. In fact, a briefing note supplied to the finance minister when he considered when he was in the development phase of his planned CPP payroll tax increase said that such an increase would do two things. One, it would make it more expensive to hire, and two, it would make it less rewarding to work, and that the combined impact of these things would lead to less employment. Makes sense. Tax hiring and work, you get less hiring and work. But the positive corollary of that is if you cut taxes on work and hiring, you get more work and more hiring. And so that's what we propose the government do. There is still time before all of these new payroll taxes kick in to cancel them and to proceed with reductions in employment insurance premiums, which had been budgeted by the previous government, a major reduction from about $1.80 on $100 earned to $1.40, which is a very large reduction. Mr. Speaker, it's over 20% in the EI payroll tax. It's a 20% reduction in the EI payroll tax. So that reduction would help small businesses afford a larger payroll. More of their money would be dedicated to paying wages for hardworking people and less paying government. And I think we'd all agree that working class employees are more deserving of that money than is the voracious appetites of government. So cut payroll taxes, a second hopeful idea that we can pursue to empower our entrepreneurs to hire more. Third, we can continue to reduce red tape. Under the previous government, we brought in something called the Red Tape Reduction Action Plan. That found that there were 400,000 rules that governments were imposing. The federal government alone was imposing on small business. Can you imagine that? So we eliminated 80,000 of those rules, systematically got them out of the way. Working with business groups like the Canadian Federation of Independent Business, we relieved much of the federal paper burden, but there's still more work to be done. And I pledge to work with the government in order to do it. Let us all commit to relieving businesses of the burden of paperwork so that they can spend all of their time creating jobs and delivering the best possible products at the lowest price to Canadian customers. Finally, so those are the things that we can do to empower our small business job creators who we know are going to supply the jobs that our young people, that are impoverished, that are disabled workers are going to benefit from in the future. Secondly, in addition to small business, we can change our tax and benefit systems across this country to make work pay. You know, in various jurisdictions of this country, if people leave social assistance to get a job, they're actually worse off. They end up paying more in tax and losing more in clawbacks than they gain in wages. So it's the effect of having a tax rate of over 100%. You know, some people complain. The NDP leader said that it was legalized theft for wealthy Canadians to pay more than 50% of their income in taxes. And frankly, I believe that no one should pay more than 50% in taxes. But most of all, we should never accept the idea that a disabled person or an impoverished person would lose more than 100% of what they gain from working. That's an effective tax rate of over 100%. It means that somebody is better off financially if they don't work. But yet that is the case for literally thousands of people across this country, and depending on their particular jurisdiction. The combined burden of federal and provincial clawbacks and taxes punishes work and makes it impossible for people to escape from the poverty trap that governments set for them. So I think we need to, all of us, put aside any differences that we might have in party line or level of government to solve this problem once and for all. We are currently studying this very problem at the Human Resources Committee as part of an overall study on poverty, and I think our principal objective there should be to find ways to make work pay. And then finally, Mr. Speaker, another hopeful idea that will help create more employment is to stop spending money we don't have. We know that increased debts only drive away investment because they create an impression of fiscal difficulty, and they signal to not only to Canadians but to the world that there will be higher taxes down the road. Everybody knows that debt today means taxes tomorrow. Whatever we borrow, we have to pay back, plus interest. So why spend money we don't have? Doing so is not only fiscally irresponsible, it is cruel. It is cruel. Every dollar we spend that we don't have will have to be taken away from a much-needed program or taxed away from a deserving worker or small business person down the road. So let us get our spending under control. Return to the balanced budget that we had just a year ago, Mr. Speaker, so that we can lead the world again as a beacon of fiscal responsibility, where investors from around the world come to create jobs and opportunity for our people. At the end of the day, we have to recognize that government cannot give people anything without first taking it away. There's no free money. There's no money tree. There's no source of dollars that the government has that no one else has. It only gets money from the people who work hard and pay taxes. And at the end of the day, Mr. Speaker, these are the people for whom we should work and fight every single day in this House of Commons. They are the people who pay the bills, who take care of their families, who build our communities. When we leave a dollar in their pockets, they do more and better with it than politicians and bureaucrats could ever do. And so, Mr. Speaker, I take that message of hope, of opportunity, of free enterprise to our friends across the way in the government and ask them to embrace these ideas which we know work and which we know can make our country stronger and better for the future. Thank you.